How's it going? This is Bo, and this is a video I'm making to help people who have asked questions about the PB-3000 replica build that I did. I'm currently building a second one, so I can show some things as I'm talking. Um, Most importantly, I get asked, what's the size? What's the port size of the ports? What's the location? So I'm gonna go over the size first, and I'm gonna go over some things I've learned and processes that I took. But first, I have an official SVS 13-inch woofer. It's actually 13 and 3/4. According to them, they will not sell these individual parts for DIY projects. So good luck with that. Took this out of an SB-3000 that I purchased, and all my sizes and stuff are based upon that. So also the amp board too. So it's a SVS amp and woofer. I wouldn't recommend building this if you don't have those, because who knows what the results are going to be. If you use a 12-inch or a 15-inch woofer, 15-inch wouldn't fit in this anyway. 12-inch, I don't know what the results would be. But for my build, I have a 1/2-inch piece that I use to create this recess. So the woofer sits in there. If you're going to attempt to try to find some thicker MDF, like 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 inches, and mill it out, good luck to you, but this is what I did. So first I'm going to tell you the sizes, and then the hole locations and all that. Front piece, I call it front A. I leave that big. I wouldn't cut that to size yet, but the actual, my dimensions going from SVS is 21.9, 18.3. So I turned that into 18 and 5/16 and 21 and 7/8, and then the length stayed the same, 23.5. But that's the outside dimensions. These inside pieces are obviously 1.5 inches narrower and 1.5 inches shorter, because I do butt joints, and just butt up the side pieces makes it 1.5 inches wider. Same with the top and bottom. So the actual dimensions of these, let me show you the 4 pieces. You got, I call this front B. You got the magnet support brace and the port tube support brace, and then the back piece. So these are all, I call those like the internal pieces. The dimensions of all 4 of those is 16 3/4 plus 1/2 16th. I don't have a 30-second measurement, so whatever that is. 20 3/8 plus 1/2 16th. So basically 20.4, 16.8. And like I said, all 4 of these are that. Pro tip, not assuming your skill level, but make sure when I cut these, I had the top marked on all of them and the front, so they're always in the same orientation, because when you cut them on the table saw, that's what I used. If I flip this board around, it's just slightly off, but if I have them all facing the right way, then they all line up. So, all right, that's the dimensions of the boards. Now for the hole locations, and I used the photo of a PB-3000, and I measured the port opening on my PB-1000, which is 6 inches, and I used that to calculate the placement of all these. So the port tube openings, or the center point, is 4.5 inches from the side and 3 1/4 from the bottom. So come from both sides, 4.5, and then up 3 1/4. I made a jig, which I'll show a little bit, to make sure they're in the same spot. And then the woofer cutout, which is 12-inch diameter, is the center point's up 13 1/8 inch. Now your width is going to depend on your board. Now if your board is slightly wider, slightly narrower, just take a tape measure and measure until the line you draw is perfect, no matter which side you measure from. And that's where this jig came in. I spent a couple hours making this. I used some black tape just to fine tune it, and a drill bushing with a 1/4 inch hole. And if I put this on this side, I put that line at 13 1/8, and I drill my hole. And because of the bushing and my hand, using a hand drill, keeps a nice straight hole. And then I come over here and I put this, and that hole lines up perfect. Like So perfect, in fact, that I can put this 1/4-inch pin through it no matter which way. So that was crucial. So just find out your center point. I'd recommend making a jig for finding, the center and for drilling a true hole. All right, so don't worry about my width. Just do 13 1/8 up and whatever your center point is. So for the port tube brace, it's the same, but what I just ended up doing was I just sandwiched these two boards together after I drilled the pilot holes, and I just had these boards together flush, and I just took the hole from front board into this so that the center was in the same spot. I did the same thing for the magnet brace and this. I had, the pilot hole cut, which is right here, drilled, and then when I lined them up, I just put the hole drilled through into the next board, drilled from the back into the front of this board, so that all the holes are in the exact same spot. I had all these boards lined up with 1/4-inch pins, and they all lined up perfect. So that's what I'd recommend. I wouldn't worry about, anything else. So for the magnet brace, it's a little tricky, but I use my SB-3000 and the photo of Audioholic's review of the PB-3000. It's 1 5/8 thick on the cross sections, and then the outer is 1 3/16. It needs to be that to clearance for the port tube. This port tube's 3.5-inch ID, 3 3/4 OD from QC Supply. Comes in 12-foot piece, but you can have them cut it to make shipping way easier. I had it cut into 4 3-foot pieces. And then it's supposed to be 19 inches from, the front with that 1/2-inch board on to the back. But your hole diameter is going to depend on what you want to do. I made it 4 inches, and then I use 1/8-inch rubber, adhesive back rubber, to create, any type of vibration. To isolate any possible vibration. But you could make it just over 3 3/4. It's up to you. And then for this one, I didn't drill the 4-inch hole all the way through. I only did it in about 5/16 of an inch, so that I had some extra about 1/2-inch material to go with this, so I create a nice radius to create like a horn look of the real ones. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, 1 3/16 border. Same with this. Did a rough cut with a jigsaw, then I used my router and a guide board to get a clean cut, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And then the magnet brace, the outer hole, or the outer ring is 9 5/8 from the center. And I drilled 3/4-inch holes, and I drew all this out, so I knew. So when I had my router going, I just did the outer. I probably should say what I used to do that. Miles Craft Circle Guide Kit, and I actually modified it. Instead of just a little crappy screw, I took a 1/4-inch pull dowel with an internal thread, and I thread locked it. It's 1/2 inch long, so that instead of screwing into MDF, which isn't gonna be very secure, now I could cut with like no wiggle room, no wobble, just a perfect secure mounting point for that. And then the router, it worked really good, so that's how I did that. The internal ring is 6 inches, that goes all the way through, and then there's a 7 3/8-inch ring that goes just a 1/4 inch deep right there, and then it's a 45 out to the edge. So 6 inch, 9 5/8, 7 3/8, 5/16 inch deep, 45 radius. Hopefully you can figure out how to get that done. It's a bit tricky. I did a test one on my first build, then I did my official one, and then now this one, it went really smooth. And then this is 1/8 inch foam, the 1/2 inch wide, bought off Amazon for the magnet, just so there's no vibration and stuff. Back piece, pretty simple. Just found the center point, made a template, using the amp board, so whatever amp board you use, if you're not using the SVS one, just make a template, make sure it fits. Use cardboard so you can make sure it's properly going to fit. And then I cut it out using a jigsaw, and then I did the extra step. I routed a recess for the outer part of the amp board so it sits flush when mounted. Just lost my microphone. Hold on. All right. Another thing, I just make a drilled jig for making sure my holes are true and square to the board. And then I used inserts, threaded inserts. I forget what the thread is. Might be 1032 or something. Because they come with their own screws, and they're not wood screws. I wouldn't use wood screws. And the last thing is having to figure out this distance here. It's going to be slightly different. What I ended up doing was I took this board after I had the foam glued. I let it sit for a day with boards on top and below or behind it, you know, to make sure that those stayed stuck down. So I took this board. It was sitting on the table. I raised it off the table because beyond the magnets, there's some extra metal that sticks out. So have this spaced off your table. And then you take this board and you set it on top of this one. And then you take your magnet and you set it down and you get it centered in this ring. There's not much space on either side. And then you're going to lift this board off here until the top hits the bottom of the woofer, and you're going to measure. And what you want is you want your magnet sitting there with its weight. It's like 20 something pounds, so it sits in there. When you put these pieces in, you want it just to slightly lift, just ever so slightly, so that when you tighten the screws down and they compress that foam, that the magnet gets pressed firm into there. That's what I did. Ended up being like 5 inches and 1/8 maybe. And then these are 8.5. This one's not super crucial, but, and then I glued this whole thing together. Made sure it's square. I had the side pieces on, made sure everything was square, and glued all these so that this is going to be a lot easier to glue together. All I gotta do is glue one side on, and then glue the sides and bottom of this on, you know, all in one piece. So it's gonna be a lot better. So anyway, I think I covered everything. Oh, the last thing. This hole is just over 17 or 13 7/8, so it's like, I think it's 13 15/16 to be exact. That way you gives just enough gap around, gives it a nice look. And I didn't talk about it, but I made some locating pins. Whoa! Yeah, I better explain. I didn't want this to be this long, but take this board. I drilled the pilot holes for the woofer and the port tube. That's all I had was the pilot holes. I took this board, took this complete, you know, this was not cut at all, and I clamped it down, and I drilled through this board into this board in 2 spots, and then I glued these 1/4 inch dowels so that I can always get this board in the exact same spot every time. So once I had those, then I took my pilot hole and I drilled through this, you know, through B into front A, so I had a dead center for the ports as well. The outer diameter of these is 6 inches. If you want to try to replicate this, I took some 1/4 inch MDF, cut some discs, glued them on, and then I milled out the holes. But once you get this done, I left this big, about 1/8 inch big all the way around. So where's my official dimensions? Sorry. So I made it about an 1/8 inch wider and an 1/8 inch taller. So when I get this all glued together, this will be the last piece I put on. I put it on, and it's going to overhang. Once the top piece, you're going to have about that much excess. Then I'm going to take my edging bit on my router, and I'm going to go around and clean it up so it's a perfect, lines up perfect, and then I'll sand it and be good to go. So yeah, I think that's it. Sorry for this being super long, but there's a lot to cover, and hopefully you pull it off. I'd love to see your results. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions.